Hey guys, tonight we dive into the wild, myth-soaked childhood of Hercules, where cribs become battlegrounds and lyre lessons turn deadly. Picture yourself in ancient Thebes, moonlight spilling through a clay brick window. It's casting shadows that slither like trouble itself. You're there, heart pounding, as a baby, not just any baby, but Hercules faces his first test. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this if you're not half-god material. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're chilling as we unravel this epic. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a dimly lit room. The air thick with the scent of olive oil lamps and fresh-cut cedar. Comedy, Hercules, mortal mother, tucks her infant son into a woven cradle. Her hands trembling slightly, not from cold, but from a mother's instinct that something's off. Thebes is no quiet suburb. It's a city buzzing with gossip, trade, and the occasional divine grudge. Tonight, that grudge takes shape. Two serpents, their scales glinting like polished bronze, slither through a crack in the wall. Their eyes glow with an unnatural hunger, sent by a certain goddess with a chip on her shoulder. You can almost hear the faint hiss, like steam escaping a kettle. As they coil closer to the cradle, Hercules, barely a few months old, doesn't cry. Most babies would wail, but this kid, he's different, okay? You lean in, noticing his tiny fists clench, his eyes sharp, even in the dark. The serpents strike, fangs bared, aiming for the soft flesh of a sleeping infant. But Hercules moves fast. His chubby hands snatch the snakes mid-lunge, gripping them like they're nothing more than pesky toys. You blink, stunned, as he throttles them, their bodies writhing in his grip. The room fills with the sound of scales scraping wood, then silence. The snakes are dead, dangling limp in his tiny fists. You can't help but smirk, imagine the diaper change after that workout. This isn't just a cute baby story, say. Historical flex, ancient Greek sources, like Pindar's Odes from the 5th century BCE, it's mentioned Hercules' serpents slaying as a cornerstone of his myth, proof of his divine lineage. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe tales claim the snakes weren't sent to kill him, but to test him, like a divine pop quiz from Mount Olympus. Historians still argue whether this story was pure myth or a metaphor for overcoming early life threats, like disease or rival clans. Either way, you're watching a demigod's first victory. And it's not even his bedtime yet. Alcmene rushes in, alerted by the commotion, her scream catching in her throat as she sees her son holding the lifeless serpents. You feel her mix of terror and our baby. Her Hercules is no ordinary child. The room seems to pulse with the weight of destiny. You glance at the cradle, now slightly splintered from the struggle, and wonder how anyone could sleep after that. Thebes will soon buzz with this tale, and you're already imagining the local bards exaggerating it over cheap wine. For now, though, you linger in the moment, the air heavy with the promise of more trials to come. That's Hercules for you, zero to hero, straight out of the crib. You're still in Thebes, the night air thick with tension, standing in the shadowed room where baby Hercules just turned to serpents into a cautionary tale. The cradle, slightly askew from the scuffle, creaks as Alcmene, his mother, stands, frozen, her eyes darting between her son and the lifeless snakes in his grip. You can smell the faint ting of fierce sweat and cedar, the room lit only by a flickering oil lamp. Her heart's pounding so loud you almost feel it in your chest. She's not just a mom startled by a close call, she's a mortal woman grappling with the reality that her kid is something else entirely. You're right there with her, wondering how you'd handle a baby who moonlights as a serpent slayer. Alcmene steps forward, her bare feet soft on the clay floor, and scoops Hercules into her arms. His tiny face is calm, like he just swatted a fly, not throttled, divine assassins. You notice her hands tremble as she checks him for scratches, her breath hitching when she finds none. The snakes, their bronze scales now dull, lie in a heap. And you can't help but think they look like discarded ropes, hardly the stuff of nightmares anymore. But for Alcmene, this is a nightmare. She's heard the rumors, the whispers about her son's divine father, Zeus, and the trouble that follows God's kids like a bad smell. You feel her dread, heavy as a wool cloak. She realizes this won't be the last time danger slithers into her home. Outside, Thebes hums with its usual chaos, merchants haggling, dogs barking, the clink of bronze from a nearby forge. But inside, it's just Alcmene, Hercules, and you, caught in a moment that feels like the gods are watching. She whispers to her son, her voice a mix of love and panic, promising to keep him safe. You want to tell her? Good luck with that. Because, let's be real, keeping a demigod safe is like trying to herd cats in a thunderstorm. She lays Hercules back in the cradle, his tiny snores filling the silence. And you wonder how she sleeps tonight, knowing what he's capable of. This moment ties to a real historical thread. Greek myths, like those in Apollodorus' library, from the 2nd century BCE, emphasize Alcmene's role as a devoted but overwhelmed mother. Caught between mortal fears and divine drama, here's a quirky bit. Though some lesser-known stories suggest Alcmene tried to burn the snakes' bodies to ward off more bad omens, only for the fire to spit out weird sparks shaped like tiny thunderbolts, historians still argue whether her fear was just maternal instinct or a sign she knew Hercules was destined for trouble. You're leaning toward both, because who wouldn't freak out when their baby's first toy is a dead viper? As Alcmene paces, you catch a glimpse of her husband, Amphitryon, peering through the doorway. He's a warrior, tough as old leather, but his face is pale, like he's just seen a ghost or worse, a god's handiwork. You can almost hear his thoughts. What did I sign up for? He steps in, his sandals scuffing the floor, and murmurs something about consulting an oracle. You smirked, typical Theban move, run into a prophet when life gets weird. But you get it. This family's just been served a divine wake-up call. And you're betting they'll need more than incense and prayers to handle what's coming. The night stretches on, and you're left wondering how many more surprises this kid has in store. You're still lingering in the Theban night, the air heavy with the aftermath of Hercules' cribside serpent showdown. The room feels smaller now, the walls closing in as Alcmene and Amphitryon huddle over their son, his tiny chest rising and falling like nothing happened. You can smell the faint char of the oil lamp burning low, its flicker casting long shadows that dance like uneasy spirits. Hercules, barely a few months old, sleeps with the smug calm of a kid who just aced his first test. You're staring at his chubby fists, still curled as if ready for round 2. He can't shake the thought. This baby's strength isn't normal. It's like watching a toddler bench press a mule to step closer. And you notice the cradle's weave is frayed where Hercules gripped it during the fight. The wood groans under your imaginary touch, proof of a power that defies his size. Alcmene whispers to Amphitryon about Zeus, her voice low, like she's afraid the gods are eavesdropping. You catch the word divine and feel a chill. Hercules isn't just strong, he's a walking myth in diapers. You imagine the neighbors gossiping tomorrow, their voices carrying over clay rooftops. Did you hear? Alcmene's kid strangled snakes. You smirk, thinking they'd probably bet on him in a wrestling match by age 2. This strength isn't just a story trick. Historical texts like Diodorus Siculus' Library of History from the 1st century BCE describe Hercules' infant feats as proof of his divine heritage, a nod to Zeus' blood running through his veins. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some obscure Greek tales claim his grip was so strong He once accidentally crushed a bronze rattle into a pancake shape, leaving Alcmene to explain it to a very confused blacksmith. Historians still argue whether these early displays were literal or symbolic of his later labors, a way to hype up his legend from the start. You're betting on a mix half-truth, half-epic PR. You shift your gaze to Amphitryon, who's pacing now, his warriors frame tense. He's muttering about training, about teaching this kid to control whatever this is. You want to pat him on the back and say, "Buddy, good luck taming a demigod." Hercules stirs, letting out a small grunt, and you swear the room shakes like his dreams are already wrestling monsters. Outside, Thebes is waking up. A rooster crows too early, and you hear the clatter of a cart hitting a pothole. Life goes on, but in this house, it's clear Hercules is rewriting the rules of what a kid can do. Alcmene kneels by the cradle, her fingers brushing Hercules' curls. You feel her awe, mixed with a mother's worry that her son's strength might outgrow her ability to protect him. She hums a lullaby, soft and shaky, and you're tempted to hum along, but the weight of what you've seen keeps you quiet. This kid's not just a handful, he's a divine handful. And you're already wondering what happens when he trades rattles for swords. The lamp sputters, casting one last flicker, and you know this night's just the start of a saga that'll echo through Thebes and beyond. You're still in Thebes, the dawn creeping over the horizon, painting the clay rooftops with a soft pink glow. The air smells of fresh bread from a nearby oven, but inside Alcmene and Amphitryon's home, the mood is anything but warm. You're hovering near the cradle where Hercules sleeps, his tiny snores a stark contrast to the chaos he unleashed last night. Those dead serpents, now a grim pile in the corner, are a reminder of the divine grudge hanging over this kid. You can feel the weight of it, like a storm cloud ready to burst. This isn't just a family drama, it's a cosmic one, and you're about to see why. The culprit, Hera, queen of the gods, whose jealousy burns hotter than a Greek summer. Picture her up on Mount Olympus, her golden throne creaking as she leans forward, its eyes narrowed, plotting against this half-mortal kid. Why the hate? Hercules is Zeus' son, born of a fling with Alcmene, and Hera's not exactly the forgiving type. You can almost hear her muttering, "Another one of Zeus' brats. Not on my watch." Okay. The serpents were her doing, a divine hit. Job meant to snuff out Hercules before he could grow into a problem. Spoiler, she underestimated him, and you're secretly cheering for the underdog. Hera's role is no mythmaker's exaggeration. Ancient sources, like Hesiod's Theogony from the 8th century BCE, paint her as a vengeful deity who targeted Zeus' offspring with a passion. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe stories claim Hera sent the snakes not just to kill, but to scare Alcmene into abandoning Hercules, hoping mortal fear would do her dirty work. Historians still argue whether Hera's wrath was purely personal or a strategic move to maintain her divine status. You're leaning toward petty, she's got that scorned spouse vibe down pat. You shift your focus to Alcmene, who's whispering prayers to any god who'll listen, her hands clutching a small amulet. The room feels heavy with her fear, the kind that makes your stomach knot. She knows Hera's behind this, and you can see it in her eyes wide, searching the shadows for the next threat. Amphitryon, meanwhile, is outside, pacing the courtyard, his spear leaning against a wall like he's ready to fight a goddess himself. You chuckle softly. Good luck taking on Hera with a pointy stick, buddy. Thebes is waking up now, the clatter of market stalls and bleating goats filtering through the walls. But this family's world feels like it's on pause. It's trapped in Hera's crosshairs. You glance back at Hercules, his tiny fists twitching in sleep, and wonder what's next for a kid who's already got a goddess gunning for him. The air hums with tension, like the moment before a lightning strike. You're betting Hera's not done yet. She's got a whole playbook of divine spite to unleash. For now though, the morning light softens the room, and you're left with the eerie calm of a battle. But a war just beginning. Hercules may have crushed those snakes, but you know the gods don't play fair, and this kid's got a long road ahead. You're back in Thebes, the morning sun now, high. It's casting golden streaks through the narrow streets where merchants hawk olives and potters clang their wares. The scent of dust and roasted barley fills the air, but you're drawn back to Alcmene, an Amphitrion's home, where the serpent incident still lingers like a bad dream. Hercules, no longer a newborn but a sturdy toddler, toddles through the courtyard, his chubby legs kicking up dirt. You watch him, half expecting him to wrestle a goat for fun. Life with mortal parents is no picnic for a demigod, and you're about to see how this kid grows up in a world that's equal parts chaotic and ordinary. Alcmene keeps Hercules close, her eyes darting like a hawk's whenever he strays too far. You feel her tension, the way she grips her shawl, knowing her son's divine blood makes him a target. Amphitryon, meanwhile, tries to play the tough dad, teaching Hercules to toss a wooden ball with uncanny precision for a 3-year-old. You smirk. Most kids are mastering potty training, but this one's got the arm of a future hero. Its courtyard's a mess of scattered toys and broken pottery, evidence of Hercules' clumsy but powerful antics. You can almost hear the neighbors whispering, "There goes Alcmene's kid, breaking stuff again." Its domestic scene ties to a historical truth. Greek myths, like those in Pausanias' description of Greece from the 2nd century CE, portray Hercules' early years as a blend of mortal upbringing and divine oddity. It's raised by parents who struggled to balance normalcy with his gifts. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tales claim Alcmene fed Hercules goat milk mixed with honey to tame his strength, believing it would make him less wild. Spoiler, it didn't. Historians still argue whether these stories reflect real parenting struggles or were crafted to humanize a larger-than-life figure. You're betting it's a bit of both. Imagine the grocery list for a demigod toddler. You notice Hercules grab a wooden stool, lifting it overhead like it's a feather. Alcmene gasps, rushing to stop him before he turns it into kindling. You can't help but chuckle. Good luck enforcing a timeout on that kid. Thebes itself adds to the chaos. Oxen carts rumble past. A street vendor yells about fresh figs, and somewhere a flute player's tune gets drowned out by a braying donkey. This is Hercules' world, a gritty, noisy backdrop where he's learning to navigate his strength among mortals who don't know whether to fear or worship him. Amphitryon kneels beside him, showing him how to stack stones, but you see Hercules pile them so high, so fast. It's like he's mocking gravity. You linger on Alcmene's face, etched with pride but shadowed by worry. She knows Hera's grudge isn't a one-off, and you feel that same unease, like a storm brewing just out of sight. Hercules laughs, a bright, wild sound, and you're struck by how normal he seems, until he accidentally cracks a stone in half. Yeah, this kid's childhood is anything but typical, okay? And you're already bracing for the next time his strength or his temper steals the show. You're still in Thebes, the midday sun baking the clay streets, where the air smells of sweat, thyme, and the faint smoke of a neighbor's cooking fire. Hercules, now a strapping boy of about 7 barrels through the family courtyard, his bare feet slapping the dirt. You watch him, half amused, half worried, as he chases a stray dog, his energy boundless like a storm trapped in a kid's body. Alcmene calls after him, her voice sharp but loving, while Amphitryon sharpens a spear nearby, muttering about discipline. You can feel the tension in this household. Raising a demigod means every day is a test. And today, Hercules' temper is about to steal the spotlight. He's not just strong, he's got a fuse shorter than a Greek candle. See it when he trips over a wooden cart, sending it splintering into pieces. Instead of crying like a normal kid, he kicks the wreckage, his face red with fury, and you swear the ground shakes. Alcmene rushes over, her shawl slipping, trying to calm him, but his anger's like a wildfire, fast and hard to douse. You're close enough to hear his frustrated growl like a tiny lion, and you can't help but think, kid, chill, it's just a cart, okay? But this is Hercules, and his tantrums aren't just tantrums, they're seismic. This fiery temper is rooted in historical accounts. Ancient texts, like those in Apollodorus' library, note Hercules' volatile nature even as a child, a trait tied to his divine strength but mortal emotions. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some obscure stories claim he once threw a bronze cup so hard it embedded in a wall, leaving Theban potters terrified to sell Alcmene dishware. Historians still argue whether his rage was a natural flaw or Hera's divine meddling, tweaking his emotions to make him volatile. You're leaning toward a mixed half-human temper, half-goddess sabotage. You watch as Hercules stomps off, ignoring Alcmene's pleas, and picks up a rock bigger than his head and hurls it into the distance. You hear a faint crash, probably some poor farmer's fence, and you wince, imagining the repair bill. Amphitryon steps in, his voice stern but shaky, trying to teach control through a wrestling stance. Hercules mimics him, but you see his fists clenched too tight, his eyes flashing with that same wild spark. Thebes buzzes around you merchants, shouting, a flute trilling in the distance, but here, it's just a boy and his parents, grappling with a power that could break more than carts. You linger on Alcmene's face, her worry deeper now, like she's seeing glimpses of a future where this temper could cost more than broken toys. You feel it too, and not in your gut, knowing Hercules' strength and rage are a dangerous combo. The sun climbs higher, and you're left wondering how long this kid can keep his anger in check before it explodes into something bigger, something that'll echo through Thebes like a warning bell. You're still in Thebes, the afternoon heat simmering, carrying the scent of sun-warmed clay and blooming oleander from a neighbor's garden. Hercules, now around 8, bounds through the family courtyard, his messy curls bouncing as he swings, a stick like it's a sword. You can hear the whoosh of it cutting the air, and you're half expecting him to accidentally launch it into the next city-state. Alcmene watches from the doorway, her hands twisting a linen cloth, while Amphitryon sharpens a knife, probably wondering if he's raising a hero or a hurricane. Today, you're about to meet someone new, Linus, Hercules' music teacher, who's walking into this chaos with a lyre and way too much optimism. Linus strides in, his tunic crisp, carrying a polished lyre that gleams like it's fresh from the craftsman. He's got the vibe of a guy who thinks he can tame anything with a good melody, and you can't help but smirk good luck with this student. Linus is no random tutor. He's a renowned musician, brother to the legendary Orpheus, whose tunes could charm rocks. You hear the soft twang as Linus plucks a string, testing the lyre, and Hercules stops mid-swing, eyeing the instrument like it's a puzzle he's not sure he wants to solve. You feel the shift in the air, like the calm before a storm, as teacher and demigod size each other up. This introduction isn't just a plot point. Historical sources, like those in Diodorus Siculus' Library of History, confirm Linus as Hercules' music teacher is tasked with refining the boy's rough edges through art. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe tales claim Linus once tried to teach Hercules a lullaby meant to soothe wild beasts, hoping it'd calm his temper. Spoiler, it backfired spectacularly. Historians still argue whether Linus was a real figure or a mythic stand-in for the cultural push to civilize young warriors. You're betting he was real enough to regret taking this gig. Linus kneels, offering Hercules the lyre, his voice smooth as honey, explaining how music can tame the soul. You see, Hercules' brow furrow taming souls isn't his style. He grabs the lyre, his grip too tight, and you wince, hearing a string snap with a sad little twang. Linus doesn't flinch, but you catch a flicker of worry in his eyes. Thebes hums outside goats bleating, a cartwheel creaking butt in the courtyard. It's just Linus, Hercules, and the looming sense that this lesson won't end with a duet. Hypnalia hovers nearby, her hope for normalcy fading fast, and you can't blame her. Teaching a demigod to strum a tune feels like teaching a bull to dance. You linger on Hercules' face, its curiosity warring with impatience, and you know this isn't going to be a peaceful mentorship. The lyre gleams in the sunlight, a fragile thing in the hands of a boy who breaks everything he touches. You're already bracing for the clash, the moment when Linus' patience meets Hercules' temper. You're not sure who's less prepared for what's coming. You're back in the Theban courtyard, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows as the air hums with the scent of dust and crushed herbs. Hercules, now 8, stands with the lyre in his hands, its snapped string dangling like a defeated foe. Linus, his music teacher, keeps a brave face, but you can see the sweat beading on his brow. He's starting to realize teaching a demigod isn't like tuning a lute. You hear the distant clatter of Thebes, a potter's wheel spinning, a woman shouting at a runaway goat. But here it's just Hercules, Linus, and the lesson teetering on the edge of disaster. You're close enough to feel the tension, like a bowstring pulled too tight. Linus, ever the optimist, tries to guide Hercules' fingers across the lyre's remaining strings, his voice soft but firm, urging patience. You watch Hercules scowl, his thick fingers fumbling, producing a sound like a cat being stepped on. You bite back a laugh music's supposed to soothe the soul, but this kid's soul is a thunderstorm. He tries again, the lyre groaning under his grip, and he wins, as another string twangs in protest. Linus corrects him, a bit sharper now, and you see Hercules' eyes flash, the temper you remember from the broken cart incident bubbling up. You're thinking, oh, Linus, don't poke the bear. This struggle is rooted in history. Ancient texts, like those in Apollodorus' library, describe Hercules' music lessons as a failed attempt to civilize his raw power, a clash between discipline and instinct. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some obscure stories claim Hercules once got so frustrated, tried to play the lyre by smacking it like a drum, leaving Linus dodging splinters. Historians still argue whether these lessons were meant to refine Hercules or just to keep him busy so he wouldn't wreck Thebes. You're betting on the latter good luck, keeping this kid distracted. Hercules snaps another string, and you hear Linus sigh, a sound heavy with the weight of a man rethinking his career choices. Hypnalia watches from the doorway, her hands clenched, probably praying her son doesn't turn the lyre into firewood. You can't help but smirk, imagine the Yup review. Great teacher, but my kid's a demigod. 0 stars. Linus tries a new approach, humming a melody and asking Hercules to follow. But the boy's patience is thinner than a papyrus sheet. He tosses the lyre down, the wood clattering on the dirt, and you feel the air shift like a storm cloud rolling in. Linus' voice sharpens, scolding now. And you know he's crossed a line. You glance at Hercules, his fists balled, his face red as a pomegranate. The courtyard feels smaller, the walls closing in as his temper flares. You're not sure if you want to grab Linus and run or just watch the chaos unfold. Thebes keeps buzzing outside. Someone's haggling over figs. A dog barks butt in here. It's a standoff between a mortal's patience and a demigod's pride. You're already dreading the next lesson, knowing this isn't going to end with a harmonious duet. You're still in the Theban courtyard, the sun dipping low, painting the walls with a warm orange glow that smells faintly of baked earth and wilting jasmine. Hercules, 8 years old and bristling with frustration, stands over the lyre. He just tossed it to the ground, its frame cracked like a bad omen. Linus, his music teacher, looks like he's aged a decade in 10 minutes. His hands raised in a mix of exasperation and desperation. You hear the distant hum of Thebes cartwheels creaking, A vendor shouting about cheap wine pot in this courtyard. The air crackles with the kind of tension that precedes a disaster. You're close enough to see Hercules' chest heaving, his temper no longer simmering, but boiling over. Linus makes a fatal mistake. He snaps at Hercules, his voice sharp as a whip, telling him to pick up the lyre and try again. You wince, knowing that tone's like tossing oil on a fire. Hercules, eyes narrow, his fists clench, and before you can blink, he grabs the lyre and swings it like a club. The wood connects with Linus' head, a sickening crack echoing through the courtyard. You freeze, your breath catching, as Linus crumples to the dirt, motionless. Hercules stands there, panting, the broken lyre dangling from his hand. You want to yell, "Kid, what have you done?" But the silence is deafening, broken only by Alcmene's gasp from the doorway. This tragic moment is no mythmaker's embellishment. Ancient sources, like those in Diodorus Siculus' Library of History, con Hercules killed Linus during a music lesson, a stark example of his uncontrollable rage. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe tales claim the lyre didn't break on impact, but flew into a tree, where it stayed, tangled in branches, as a grim memorial. Historians still argue whether this act was pure accident or a sign of Hercules' innate violence, possibly stoked by Hera's divine meddling. You're leaning toward a Mixinger plus super strength is a recipe for catastrophe. Alcmene rushes to Linus, her hands shaking as she checks for a pulse, her face pale as chalk. You feel her panic, the kind that knots her stomach, as she realizes her son's strength has crossed a deadly line. Amphitryon bursts into the courtyard, his spear clattering to the ground, his eyes wide with shock. You can almost hear his thoughts. This kid's going to be the death of us all. Thebes keeps humming outside, someone's laughing. A donkey brays butt in here. It's a frozen tableau of horror. Hercules drops the lyre, his expression shifting from rage to confusion, like he's just woken up from a bad dream. You linger on the scene, dust settling around Linus' body, the broken lyre glinting in the fading light. You know, this isn't just a tantrum gone wrong. It's a turning point, a moment that'll haunt Hercules and his family. The air feels heavy, like it's holding its breath. And you're left wondering how a boy so young, so strong, can carry the weight of what he's done. You're still in the Theban courtyard, the evening sky bruising purple, the air thick with the scent of cooling earth and bitter grief. Hercules, barely 8, stands frozen, the broken lyre at his feet, its strings curled like dead Snexeronic. Considering that cribside stunt, you remember? Linus lies still, his body a grim reminder of what happens when a demigod's temper meets a mortal's skull. You hear Alcmene's choked sob, her hands hovering over Linus as if she could will him back to life. Amphitryon's there too, his face a mask of shock and fury, and you can feel the weight of this moment, heavy as a millstone, pressing down on everyone. Thebes hums faintly beyond someone's strumming a harp, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding here but in this courtyard. The world feels like it stopped. Hercules' eyes are wide, his earlier rage replaced by a dawning horror. You want to shake him, tell him to snap out of it, but he's just a kid, one with the strength of 10 men and the self-control of a toddler. Alcmene pulls him away from Linus, her voice trembling as she whispers his name, trying to shield him from what he's done. You see Amphityon kneel by Linus, checking for signs of life, his hand steady, but his jaw tight. You're betting, he's thinking. How do we explain this to the neighbors? The fallout's coming. You can already sense the whispers that'll spread faster than a Theban market rumor. This moment is grounded in history. Ancient texts, like Apollodorus' library, describe Hercules' killing of Linus as a pivotal childhood event, marking his struggle with rage and its consequences. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some obscure stories claim the townsfolk tried to banish Hercules after this, only for an oracle to intervene saying his destiny was too big for exile. Historians still argue whether this act led to formal punishment or just tightened Alcmene's grip on her son's upbringing. You're leaning toward the latter. Good luck punishing a kid who can crush boulders. Amphitryon stands, his voice low as he orders a servant to fetch a priest. You hear the crunch of sandals on dirt as the servant bolts, probably glad to escape the scene. Alcmene holds Hercules close, his head buried in her shoulder. And you feel her fear not just for Linus, but for what her son's becoming. The courtyard shadows stretch longer, swallowing the broken lyre. And you can't help but think it's a fitting symbol for Hercules' fractured childhood. Outside, Thebes keeps moving. Coats bleat, a cart rattles, but in here, it's a family grappling with the tragedy that feels like Hera's shadow looming larger than ever. You're left wondering how they'll move forward when every step feels like it's on cracking ice. You're back in Thebes, the night air cool and sharp, carrying the faint scent of olive oil lamps and distant wood smoke. The courtyard, where Linus' body was just hours ago, is now empty, save for the cracked lyre lying forgotten in the dirt. Hercules, still 8, is nowhere in sight, likely tucked away by Alcmene. It's probably clutching him like he's her last lifeline. You hear the low murmur of Amphitryon speaking with a priest outside, their voices heavy with words like atonement and curse. Thebes hums softly beyond, its nighttime rhythm of barking dogs and clinking tavern cups, oblivious to the tragedy that's shaken this family. You're standing in the aftermath, feeling the weight of Hercules' strength turning fields into proving grounds. Word of the lioness incident has spread, and you imagine the townsfolk whispering that kids trouble gods or no gods. But Hercules isn't moping. He's out in the fields beyond Thebes, testing his strength like a boy who doesn't know his own limits. You see him, his tunic streaked with dirt, lifting a boulder the size of a cartwheel and tossing it like it's a pebble. The ground thuds, and you swear the nearby goats scatter like they've seen a lion. His strength is no secret now. Remember those snakes he crushed as a baby? This is that times 10. You can't help but grin, thinking he'd probably win at Theban shot put before he hits puberty. This display ties to historical accounts, ancient sources like Pausanias' description of Greece. Note Hercules' childhood feats of strength, like lifting oxen or uprooting trees, as proof of his divine lineage. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe tales claim he once accidentally threw a rock so far it landed in a neighboring village, sparking a local festival to appease the gods. Historians still argue whether these stories were exaggerated to build his legend or reflected real awe at his physical prowess. You're betting on a mixed half-truth, half-Theban hype machine. You watch Hercules wrestle a fallen log, his laughter echoing as he snaps it in half. Alcmene's there, hovering at the field's edge, her face a mix of pride and dread. You feel her heart twist. She knows his strength could protect Thebes or destroy it. Amphitryon joins her, his spear slung over his shoulder, muttering about training this power for good. You chuckle softly. Good luck turning a human catapult into a disciplined soldier. Thebes' fields stretch wide, dotted with olive trees, and you hear a distant shepherd's flute, a calm note in the chaos. Hercules keeps going, heaving stones, oblivious to the stakes of his growing legend. You linger on his silhouette against the moonlit field, his energy boundless but dangerous. The air feels charged, like Hera is still watching, waiting for another chance to trip him up. You're left wondering how long his parents can guide a boy whose strength could reshape the world or break it. You're standing on the outskirts of Thebes, the early morning mist curling around your ankles, carrying the scent of damp grass and olive groves. The city's waking up merchants shout about fresh figs, a donkey brays in protest but out. Here in the fields, Hercules, now pushing 9, is making his own noise, You hear the thud of a massive log hitting the ground, split clean in two by his bare hands. His laughter, wild and unbridled, echoes across the hills. And you can't help but think this kid's strength is turning him into a local legend, faster than a bard can strum a tune. You're watching him, half amazed, half worried, as whispers of his deeds spread through Thebes like wildfire. The townsfolk aren't just gossiping about broken carts or that poor Linus incident you still wince thinking about. No, they're starting to talk about Hercules like he's something more, a boy touched by gods, destined for greatness or ruin. He overhears a shepherd nearby, leaning on his staff, muttering to a farmer about how Hercules lifted an ox over his head last week just to show off. You smirk, imagining the ox's confused moo as it went airborne. Thebes is buzzing with stories. He snapped a tree branch to make a club. He outran a wild boar. He accidentally cracked a well-stone rim while fetching water. You're betting half these tales are exaggerated, but with Hercules, who knows? Q. This growing fame is rooted in history. It's ancient texts, like those in Pindar's Odes from the 5th century BCE, describe Hercules' childhood feats as the foundation of his mythic status, with locals already singing of his strength. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe stories claim a Theban soothsayer predicted Hercules would either save the city or level it, sparking bets among tavern-goers. Historians still argue whether these early legends were grassroots tales or crafted by priests to boost Thebes' prestige. Okay. You're leaning toward the people's gossip. Okay. Nothing spreads faster than a good story about a kid who can bench press a cow. You watch Hercules hurl another stone, its arc cutting the sky before it lands. With a distant thud, startling a flock of birds. Alcmene lingers nearby, her eyes tracking him, her face etched with that familiar mix of pride and fear. You feel her worry. She knows these stories make Hercules a target, not just for Hera, but for mortals who fear or envy him, Amphitrians. There too, teaching him to aim his throws, but you see the strain in his posture, like he's trying to tame a storm. Thebes' fields stretch wide, the air alive with the hum of cicadas, but you sense the weight of fame settling on Hercules' young shoulders. You linger on the scene, it's the morning light, glinting off Hercules' sweat-soaked curls as he grins, oblivious to the growing myth around him. You can't shake the feeling that these whispers are just the start. It's a prelude to a life where every step will be watched, judged, and sung about. Thebes keeps humming, but you know this boy's legend is about to outgrow the city itself. You're back in the fields, outside Thebes, the midday sun blazing, the air thick with the scent of wild thyme and dusty earth. Hercules, now 9 and change, is wrestling with a makeshift club he carved from an olive branch, swinging it at a stack of hay bales that never stood a chance. You hear the thwack of wood on straw, the bales exploding into clouds of golden dust, and you can't help but grin. This kid's turning farm chores into a spectacle. Thebes hums in the distance with its usual clatter of carts and shouting vendors. But out here, Hercules is a one-boy show, and you're starting to feel Hera's shadow creeping back. It's like a storm cloud that won't quit. Her divine grudge, the one that sent those snakes you still shudder thinking about, hasn't faded. You imagine her up on Mount Olympus, her eyes glinting with that same spite, watching Hercules grow stronger and more reckless. She's not done with him, and you can feel it in the air, a prickling unease like static before lightning. Maybe it's the way the wind shifts, or how the birds go quiet when Hercules swings his club too hard, splitting a rock clean in half. You're thinking, Hera, give the kid a break, but you know better gods don't do timeouts. Her influence feels like a weight on Thebes, okay? And you're betting she's cooking up something worse than serpents. This divine tension is no myth maker's fluff, okay? Ancient sources, like Hesiod's Theogony, emphasize Hera's relentless vendetta against Hercules, okay? A constant force shaping his early years. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some obscure tales claim Hera once sent a swarm of wasps to torment Hercules during a nap, only for him to swat them away like flies, leaving a pile of tiny stingers. Historians still argue whether Hera's schemes were meant to kill him or just drive him to madness, testing his mortal limits. You're leaning toward madness. Her style seems more about breaking spirits than bodies. You watch Hercules pause, wiping sweat from his brow, his eyes scanning the horizon, like he senses something watching. Alcmene's nearby, her hands twisting a reed basket, her face tight with that familiar worry. You feel her dread. She knows Hera's not just a story to scare kids at bedtime. Amphitrion's there too, shouting pointers about grip and stance. But you see the strain in his eyes, like he's bracing for the next divine curveball. The fields stretch wide, dotted with grazing sheep, their bleats mixing with the hum of cicadas. But you can't shake the feeling that Hera's presence is closer than ever, her schemes lurking like a predator in the tall grass. You linger on. Hercules, his young frame silhouetted against a blazing sky, his club resting on his shoulder like a warrior's badge. Thebes keeps churning, but out here, it's just a boy, his parents, and the looming threat of a goddess who plays for keeps. You're left wondering what Hera's got planned next, and whether Hercules' strength will be enough to face it. You're still outside Thebes, the late afternoon sun dipping low, casting golden rays across fields that smell of sun-baked grass and distant wood smoke. Hercules, nearing 10, moves through the open land with purpose, his makeshift club slung over his shoulder like a warrior's trophy. You hear the crunch of his sandals on gravel, the low bleat of a sheep scattering as he passes. Thebes hums faintly behind you vendors, packing up a flute's mournful note, but out here, it's Hercules' domain, and you're watching him train, not just for sport, but for a destiny that feels closer every day. His parents trail behind, Alcmene's eyes sharp with worry, Amphitrion's hand resting on a spear, both knowing they're raising a force of nature. Hercules isn't just playing anymore. He's being shaped into something more. You see, Amphitryon, guide him through drills, wrestling stances, spear throws, even sprinting across the field until dust clouds rise. Hercules takes to it like a fish to water, his strength making every move look effortless. He heaves a boulder twice his size, and it lands with a thud that shakes the ground. You chuckle, thinking he'd probably win at Theban strongman if they had one. But there's purpose here. Amphitrion's training him to harness that power, to channel the rage that cost Linus his life, the kind of rage you still wince remembering. This is a boy being forged into a hero, whether he knows it or not. This training is rooted in history. Ancient texts, like those in Apollodor's library, describe Hercules' youth as a time of preparation, with mentors teaching him combat and survival to ready him for his fated trials. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe stories claim he once wrestled a bull to the ground during a training session, only to let it go because he felt bad for its classic Hercules, all power and soft spots. Historians still argue whether this training was formal, like a warrior's apprenticeship, or just desperate parenting to keep him from breaking Thebes. You're betting on both Amphitrions, no fool, but neither is Hercules tameable. You watch Hercules spar with a wooden dummy, splintering it with one swing, and you hear Alcmene's sharp intake of breath. She's not just worried about Hera's schemes, which you felt looming last time, but about whether her son can control himself. Amphitryon shouts encouragement, his voice gruff but proud, and you see Hercules grin, all teeth and fire, like he's born for this. The fields stretch wide, the air alive with the buzz of cicadas and the distant clink of a shepherd's bell. But you feel the weight of expectations settling on Hercules. He's not just a kid anymore. He's a weapon being sharpened, and you're wondering if you'll wield that power or be consumed by it. You linger on his silhouette, the sun glinting off his sweat-soaked shoulders as he swings his club again, tireless. Thebes keeps moving, But out here, it's clear Hercules is preparing for something bigger: battles, labors, a life that'll echo beyond these fields. You're left with a quiet thrill, knowing his story's about to get epic. You're still in the fields, outside Thebes, the twilight settling in, soft and heavy, with the air carrying the scent of cooling earth and faint lavender from a nearby grove. Hercules, now almost 10, stands tall against the fading light, his club resting on the ground, his chest heaving from another round of training. You hear the distant hum of Thebes taverns, filling a dog's bark echoing, but out here, it's just Hercules, his parents, and the weight of a future that feels closer than ever. You're watching him, his young frame radiating power, and you can't shake the sense that everything you've seen, the snakes, the rage, the lyre, the fields, is building to something monumental. This is the moment you glimpse the shadow of his legendary 12 labors. Amphitrion's voice cuts through the dusk, gruff but steady, as he tells Hercules to aim his next row farther, stronger. You see Hercules nod, his eyes bright with determination, and hurl a spear that vanishes into the twilight, landing with a thud somewhere beyond the hill. You smirk. Imagine the poor shepherd who'll find that stuck in his fence tomorrow. Alcmene watches, her hands clasped, her face a mix of pride and quiet dread, like she knows each feat pulls her son closer to a path she can't follow. You feel it too, a tingling anticipation, like the air before a storm, hinting at the trials that'll define him. This foreshadowing is no poetic stretch. Ancient sources, like Apollodor's library, frame Hercules' childhood as a prelude to his 12 labors. Each early act of strength or temper, a sign of the epic challenges ahead. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe tales claim a Theban CR once saw a lion's shadow trailing Hercules during training, a nod to his future battle with a Nemean lion. Historians still argue whether these childhood stories were crafted to prefigure his labors or simply grew from his reputation. You're leaning toward destiny. Everything about this kid screams, born for greatness. You watch Hercules pick up another spear, his movements fluid, almost too perfect for a boy. Amphitryon claps his shoulder, muttering about heroes and gods, while Alcmene's gaze drifts to the stars, as if searching for answers or mercy. The fields are quiet now, the cicadas fading, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. You can't help but think back to those snakes he crushed as a baby, the lyre he shattered, the legend already spreading through Thebes. Every swing, every outburst feels like a step toward those labors, monsters, kings, and impossible tasks waiting just over the horizon. You linger on Hercules, his silhouette sharp against the twilight, his club a dark line against the sky. The weight of his future presses down, but for now, he's just a boy, grinning as he chases one last throw. You feel the story slowing, the world softening, and you know it's time to ease out of this tale as the stars begin to prick the sky. You let your mind drift, the fields of Thebes fading into a gentle haze. Hercules' laughter lingers, soft now, like a memory settling into your bones. You're back in your own space, the hum of a fan or the quiet of your room wrapping around you. His childhood, wild, reckless, touched by God's, feels like a dream. You've just wandered through, each moment a spark of the hero he'll become. Let the weight of his trials slip away, replaced by the calm of night. Close your eyes, let the story rest, and sink into the peace of sleep, where legends wait just beyond the stars.